Susan, welcome today to the Success with Soul podcast. I am so excited to have you on here and excited for our listeners. Please take a moment to introduce yourself to the Success with Soul podcast listeners.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be with you. I love talking about all the goodness that we have in store. And I guess my official title is I am the founding CEO of the Simmons University Institute for Inclusive Leadership. Simmons University is a women's-centered university in Boston. And I work with professional organizations, and our institute brings training and conferences and other leadership development for the purposes of shifting minds around what it means to be inclusive and to create gender parity in leadership. I'm an author and a sunset chaser and a mom of two girls and a mom of two Portuguese water dogs. And I hail from the small island of Martha's Vineyard, where I proudly went to high school and grew up. And so I have an affection for words and beaches.
I love that. I am from South Florida, so I feel the same about the beaches.
Yeah. A little oxygen.
Yeah. So Susan, I want to dive right into it. You and I chatted a little before, and there is something that we spoke about that I definitely think our listeners would benefit from hearing from you. And that is, what does it mean to master your own inner critic? And why is that so important in personal and professional growth?
Oh, gosh. So, well, look, to master it is to start to notice on a moment-to-moment basis when we're not being so kind in our mind. What we think and feel drives what we say and do. So if we're thinking and feeling things that are harsh about ourselves or about others, it's going to impact the efficacy of our impact in relationship to others and in relationship to ourselves. So this is important work, and it's important work personally in personal relationships, and it's really important professionally to navigate, especially now, the complex dimensions of difference, seen and unseen, that we're having to negotiate at work.
Absolutely. So how does an inner critic, how does that mindset and that self-perception, like what are some common ways where in your field where you have seen that it's holding people back?
So right. So just a bit about the way the inner critic shows up. So I call her fair game. So she can be pointed at me, we can have it pointing at ourselves. So it's you shouldn't have, you should have, you were supposed to, why didn't you? It's by definition sort of distracting and minimizing. It's questioning of your value. It's if my inner critic runs rampant about me, I'm probably not going to speak up or stand up for what I believe, think, feel is right. I'm probably going to hold back. I'm not going to, maybe I'll question my true value. I'm going to take less risks. I'm going to be less courageous. I'm going to feel less safe being authentic. I'm going to question my own ability to be resilient. I mean, the list goes on, but I'm going to play less. So it doesn't necessarily hurt others because in relationship, it does hurt organizations, because if I'm not bringing my full self because I don't feel good enough about myself to the table, you're only getting a fraction of the actual potential value that I could add. Conversely, if my inner critic is sort of in my head focused on others. They should have, they shouldn't have, they were supposed to, they didn't, why did they? That's actually doesn't feel good. Even if you think it, people can sense when you're being critical of them. Last I checked, people don't like to be controlled. They don't like to be yelled at. They don't like to be bullied. They don't like to be put down. They don't like to be interrupted. They don't like being reacted to. And so all sorts of implications with how we work effectively together with others stems as a result of not being super clear and intentional about from where we are speaking, and from, that begins with noticing thoughts and feelings, and then managing how we show up in the world.
I love that. So leaning a little bit more into that, clarity and intention, those were the two words that really stood out to me. What are some strategies or techniques that individuals can use to identify and overcome their inner critics, that negative self-talk?
Yeah. So more and more, I've been referring to this as the radical reframe. Okay. So first things first, you have to actually notice. Okay. So you actually have to be aware. And I would say easy red flags for everyone who's going to watch or listen is the words I've used around should, shouldn't, supposed to. If that's a thought you're having about yourself or someone else, I would immediately just take a little time out. Like, what's going on, right? Because when we're acting from there, there's already resentment, there's already disappointment, there's already annoyance, there's already some level of dissatisfaction, and chances are you're not going to be able to bring your best self to the table. So you have to reframe, like, first, what's going on. So I would say step one is to notice. Like, what are the harsh feelings or thoughts that are running in your head? I don't think we all live every day, all day long, feeling harsh feelings or thinking harsh thoughts. And I think it's a very human experience to do this more often than we even know.
Yeah. So speaking into the reframing, how can reframing that negative self-talk and really cultivating self-compassion, right, contribute to personal and professional success?
Yeah. So look, after you recognize it, you have to take a time out, because something's up. If you're already being critical of yourself or someone else, something's going on. So I would say just take a hot minute, an adult time out, take a walk, take a breath. If you're in a meeting, just pause, right? So we've got the nervous system involved here, of course, right? So our when we're in a moment of harshness, chances are something in our sympathetic nervous system is activated, right? So our action might be fight, flight, fix, and that is a reaction to feeling something that doesn't feel good. We want to hang out more in our asympathetic nervous system, where we can choose from a state of intentionality, of calm, of groundedness, of being purposeful, as opposed to sort of a heightened sense of reactivity. So yeah, there's a couple different moves we can make. And you certainly can ask for help from others, but sort of in the heat of the moment, the first step is to pause and to just take a breath. I use both compassion and sort of radical levels of compassion and radical levels of curiosity. What is going on? Why am I triggered right now? So it's being incredibly curious about why, and then what I might need in order to step back into being sort of coming from a place of respect and compassion. And then channeling the compassion, like you said, is super hard. When you're in a moment of feeling not good enough, the last thing you want to do is like, oh, but you're so wonderful. I call, if my inner critic is, she's old, she's wise, she is so good at her job. I have now birthed an inner champion, and my inner champion, she's got a lot of energy, and she's younger, she's more fit, and she's exuberant. And, it's that voice that I channel, like, hang on a minute, he's doing the best he can. Or you might, just the other day I had the thought, well, you've been thinner, you've been fatter, right? Like in my own ever changing, aging body, right? So it's the voice inside our head that is kinder and gentler and frankly more empathetic with ourselves or with others, so that we can return to a place where we can actually be productive. And if we need to make a request, we can make a request from that place. Or if we need to ask a question to learn more, we can ask a question from that place, as opposed to, attitude,
I love that you said curiosity. That's actually one of my core values in life. So I lean
Great
into
value.
that a lot more. Yeah. And that came from being highly self-critical, having that inner critic, and, deciding that I wanted to be curious instead of judgmental.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say decided. I do think it's a choice. I really do. For those people who suffer from an undiagnosed mental health issue like depression or anxiety, it's hard to just decide and then change. Oftentimes, some sort of, cognitive behavioral and or medical intervention is necessary to really practice this work. And certainly it's available to just about every healthy adult. We have all the capacity to take the space between stimulus and response. And I do think in that space is just about all the grace we need to have the lives we want. So it does take a lot of curiosity, though.
It definitely does. A quote comes up for me, and it's Mel Robbins, and she says that change comes down to a choice. Change your decisions, change your life.
It's all a choice. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit. Keeping the focus on the palm of your hand. That's a really powerful concept. Can you explain what it means and how can it help individuals stay present and focused?
So the locus of control of how I show up in the world, regardless of what's happening outside me. So that's other people's behavior. That's global events like pandemics, wars, dictators, politicians, stuff, weather. It's not dependent actually on external forces because it's an intrinsic practice. So what I remind people is that the locus of control is in the palm of your hands. No one robs you of the ability to take the space so that you can show up the way you want to show up. You're not going to do it perfectly because we all get triggered. We all get stressed. We all feel reactive sometimes. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of yoga. I think meditation, yoga, conscious breath work is really, really helpful to align our energies. And, I've seen someone leave from a yoga class that was just in lotus pose and go give someone the finger in the parking lot because they cut her off driving. Like, I've actually witnessed this. And so something happens where we can be in intentional sort of consciousness 1 minute about being compassionate and coming from respect and curiosity and all the things that we value and espouse. And the next minute, we don't honor that value. So what I like to sort of hold is that it's the choice that is the choice to show up in the ways that make us feel good and that is productive in relationship and results in the impact we want is in the palm of our hands. No one can make you feel bad without your consent. And so we reminding ourselves like, oh, wait a minute, hang on. I'm waiting for permission to be able to feel a certain way or think a certain way or act a certain way. It's like, hang on a minute, take back the mantle of how you get to show up.
Yeah, I very much like the idea of literally looking down at the palm of my hand. Sometimes it's important to kind of like have that physical trigger of, it is really in the palm of your hand. So I love that. How can maintaining focus on the present moment really positively impact our productivity, our decision-making, and our overall well-being.
Yeah, I mean, your most powerful moment is your present moment. How?
Yes.
You got to return there. So here's the thing. The world is not orchestrating ease when it comes to being present. I mean, just having a phone that's dinging in the background, which is not dinging, I turn my ringer off, but like, my daughter has an override ring on this. And I'm like, oh, did I tell her I was in a pocket? Right. So like, there is both present distractions as well as the anticipation of distractions, right, in our own mind, as well as second conversations or third conversations in our own head, the many voices in our head. There's no shortage of opportunity to not be present. And so I believe being present is a moment to moment practice, which is, oh my gosh, I've noticed like I'm in this meeting, but my mind just drifted over here. Come on back, right? So I catch myself when I'm not present. I tell women this a lot who struggle with guilt, particularly, if they travel for work and have a family at home, or if they feel torn between being in two places. A lot of us do too much. And so we feel like we're never doing any one thing quite enough. The loving remedy to this is to bring ourselves back to the present moment. If I choose to be traveling for work, to give of my gifts and to inspire others to do this work, I'm not, by definition, at home, when my daughter comes home from high school and is hoping I'll be there to make her a salad. So am I going to, be in, I'm going to San Diego. Am I going to be in California in a couple of days feeling bad that I'm not at home? No. And that's a choice too. And when I think it, I can say, nope, you know what? It's okay. You get to be here now. Be here now. The only one that loses if I don't live my life in the present is me. That's the first person who loses. And then I would argue a lot of other people lose too, because then I go into feelings of shame and not good enough. And then I start to have expectations about how other people should show up, because if they did that, I could be in the present more, see how like blame and shame just kind of seep right in there for why we can't be in the present. I say, it's just not true. We can determine that. And it is moment to moment.
Yes, it's definitely a practice.
It's a practice. It's a practice. I feel like, there's so many people who are like, well, if I just go to this one workshop, or if I, and I'm in the business of writing books and giving talks and everything, but I think there's this like holy grail concept of if I just climb that next mountaintop, then I'll be okay. Then I'll see the answer. Then I'll arrive. And it's like, hang on, do all the things that light you up. Do all the things that bring you to your best self. And know that life is hard. Relationships are hard. People disappoint us. Things don't go the way they're planned sometimes. To have the expectation of arrival, I think, is a really faulty premise. It's like, I'm just psyched if I can do better as my moments pass, yeah.
Something that you just said, to have the moment of arrival. I've trained for marathons before, and I can unequivocally say that what I remember most were my training runs. Sure, I remember crossing the finish line, absolutely. But what I go to when I recall my marathon journeys were my training runs, and what I felt, and how I did it, or everything that came up was the journey. It definitely was not the day of, which felt like it went by in a jiffy. So absolutely.
I know it's trite. I know it is. But the older I get, the more I realize truly life is a journey. It's not about the destination. It's about growing and learning and becoming along the way.
Yes, I love that, becoming. So you said something, and that is your best self. So investing in one's best self, right? That's a concept that I think we're all striving for, at least in our space. I know our listeners definitely are. Can you explain, what does it entail? How do individuals go about becoming their best self?
You bet. This is my favorite topic because it's one and the same with sort of, returning to a compassionate place, to mastering your inner critic, to living in full respect, to, adopting the radical reframe. So the way we define best self, and my co-authors and I wrote about it in our last book. I wrote a book with Janet Foudy and Lynn Perry Wooten, and it's called Arrive and Thrive, 7 Impactful Practices for Women Navigating Leadership. I would argue for anyone who identifies in any way, shape, or form that's listening to this podcast, the 7 practices apply to you. I think they're human practices. And the context, some of the gendered context in which we work and live is infused in the work. But be that as it may, we believe that in order to live a life of significance, we need to invest in and return to our best self. And the way we define best self is it's where your strengths and talents, both earned and developed over the course of your life experience, as well as character traits that make you you. When your strengths and talents come into concert with where you're called to add value to others, right? So where people see those and want them and value them, which is also where you experience vitality and joy. So it's really I think the ultimate trifecta is when your strengths and talents add value to others and light you up. That is your best self. Just even noticing how much real estate in my day am I spending feeling like I'm even close to being my best self, right? And I think the being of best self, it's probably not realistic to think that we're going to be doing the things where all of these 3 things match up every minute of every day, right? Because, I have to remind really smart people a lot, like leadership is a relationship. Relationships are subjective, which means at any moment I might say something or you might say something that one of us will either misinterpret, not understand to be what we meant, be offended by it, have a reaction to it. And therein lies like, oh, I was just being my best self. I'm trying to do my jam here. And, so then we're in conflict. And so I don't think being in the flow of our best self all day, every day is realistic. We can truly work, though, on making choices, going back to choice making, to both be inside ourselves in our best self, which is to be appreciative, assuming best intention, and returning to a place of respect before we speak. And we also can make choices about how we spend our time that would avail us a feeling of more energy. Because I think being in our best self is by definition, is an energizing place, right? Because we're aligned, we're integrated, we're lit up.
We're lit up. Oh, yes, I love that. Is there anything that you wish I had asked that I didn't ask?
No, although I'll offer to you this. I am a fellow traveler. I have a ton of evidence-based research and field research at this point. After 5, I'm working on my 5th book. I've worked with thousands of leaders. And at the end of the day, I practice a moment-to-moment practice to return to my best self. And the reason I want to share that with you is because, again, going back to like, there's no mountaintop, there's no arrival. I think to be human is to struggle in relationship with self and relationship with others. And the name of the game is to be aware, is conscious awareness. And so I just want to say I stand for both being human, messing up, and committing over and over and over again to doing better.
I love that. It reminds me of Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all we can do.
Yes. Susan, here in the podcast, we have a lightning round. So I am just going to ask you 5 questions. Don't overthink it.
Okay.
The first one is, what's your favorite way to make time for self-care while, running your own company?
Schedule it.
Schedule it. Okay. What's one tool or strategy that you use to help with time management?
This sounds very indulgent. I have an administrative assistant. I have an executive assistant who helps me manage my life. It's an earned privilege that I'm very conscious of. The other thing is I take time to I take time to think ahead. And so sometimes I have to schedule the time. So answers 1 and 2 go together.
Schedule it. Yes. And here at Team KK, we're big on if it's not on the calendar, it probably isn't going to happen.
Right.
Yes. What's the most powerful, and this I'd love to hear from you, being that you yourself are an author. What's the most powerful business mindset book you've ever read? This is the one that you're referencing over and over again and has made the biggest difference in your life.
There's so many. It depends upon the season, right?
Okay.
Right now, the season of life I'm in. This is not a speed round answer, but right now, I think my favorite book right now is a book called Boundary Boss, because I worked hard on my self-esteem, and learning boundaries, interpersonal boundaries, as a card-carrying member of the people-pleasing party, has been just a gift. So it's by Terry Cole, Boundary Boss.
Love it. This is going to definitely go into our list. What's your favorite quote, mantra, or affirmation for when things get tough and you feel like giving up?
You already mentioned Maya Angelou. For a long time, I closed every keynote I gave on the inner critic with, people will forget what you say and what you do, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I think that single notion of how do I want to be remembered in the moment, in the day, in years ahead, and after I leave the earth, that inspires me to do better.
Love that. Love that. Okay. And you're in the Success with Soul podcast. So what does success with soul mean to you?
I think I translate success now to thriving. I prefer the word thriving with soul because it feels more all-encompassing to me. So I would say success with soul feels like I'm thriving from a place of full respect for myself, and I return to that place and give of my gifts and pay attention to where I'm called to add service, to add value.
I love that. You're the first person that has ever said that on the podcast.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
I love it. Susan, where can our listeners find you?
Lots of places. Okay, so I'm on LinkedIn. I use my my maiden name because there's a lot of Susan Brady, Susan McEntee Brady. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram, on Facebook. Also, inclusiveleadership.com. And we have a book website for my last book, arriveandthrive.com. So any of those places.
Wonderful. Susan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I know our listeners are going to love this episode. I'm grateful for you taking the time.
You're such a warm and gracious host, and it's been a pleasure being with you. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye.